All right, cool. So that brings us over to Bitcoin. Bitcoin crossed 100K, peaking at about $103,000. And this was a hot topic, and everyone has been talking about Bitcoin, whether it is going to be used as a reserve asset for different countries, whether it's a bubble and it's going to zero. There's opinions from, every end of that debate. So it's really interesting to see. Uh, Basically, Michael Saylor has been one of the biggest advocates for Bitcoin, the CEO of MicroStrategy. He's been all over talking about it. I think what's interesting to talk about when it comes to Bitcoin is really when you look at like the global adoption of Bitcoin, really the US is still very far behind other countries in terms of adopting Bitcoin. So I want to say that South Korea has like double the crypto adoption of the US, because for the past 4 years, we've had an SEC chairman who has basically tried to kill the crypto industry. And there's a lot of debate on what DeFi, what Bitcoin can be. I personally am a big believer in what this can be. When you look at countries that don't have stable currencies, DeFi is like a saving grace to be able to actually put their money somewhere where it's secure and they have control of it versus putting it into their home currency. That's why you see countries like India, Nigeria, Indonesia being some of the top adopters of cryptocurrency around the world. So why don't I just quickly share my screen again and show some of the global adoption of crypto. All right, cool. So yeah, as you can see, India being labeled as the top adopter of crypto in the world through this, but you can see a lot of like Southeast Asia, Nigeria being a big adopter of cryptocurrency, and the US, who's usually a leader in new technologies, lagging quite a bit behind. Europe lagging even further behind in terms of crypto adoption. So really interesting to see. Here's the breakdown of where countries are landing on this. I think it's a very complex topic. At the end of the day, it's very speculative. Like, this isn't a traditional investment in Bitcoin that has a cash flow like a stock. This is a store of value, and it's a digital store of value. So it makes sense that Bitcoin might not always be this great store of value. We might move to something else. But it certainly makes sense that DeFi sticks around as kind of a libertarian check and balance to centralized banking systems and control structures. But if we look at Bitcoin and kind of think about where it could go, if we just get a little bit optimistic here for a little bit and look at like gold's market cap, if we think that Bitcoin is going to compare to gold someday as a store of value, which realistically there's more and more gold that could be mined, right? So whenever the price of gold goes up, you can mine more of it, and then that kind of stabilizes the price. So the price of a house in terms of gold is basically the same as it was like 50 years ago. It just maintains a really stable value. But the thing is, Bitcoin has a limited supply, right? And we're talking about a world where inflation is maybe 2 to 5 to 8% per year. And Bitcoin's definitely going to outpace inflation. Gold usually outpaces inflation by a little bit. So we could see Bitcoin returning 8-10% a year on average, even once it reaches maturity. But you're certainly going to have a lot of swings up and down along the way. Ultimately, I think you'd probably want to reevaluate your hypothesis once it gets to a more stable market cap. But based on Bitcoin adoption, I think it still has a long way to go. So let's see if I grab that information on Bitcoin adoption. I know I can find it. And I don't know if you have anything to add here, Emmanuel, while I try to dig this graphic up.
This is a little bit out of my scope, but I think if you go back to that graph that you showed just now, I think it was a hell of a year for Bitcoin in 2024. I mean, it's been a crazy ride for people who stuck to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Bitcoin has been the best asset you could possibly hold, right? So it's been insane. And like the risk with that is like, you don't want to like buy something in a bubble, right? So you really have to like understand what you want to do. And obviously this isn't investment advice, so make your own decision and decide if you want to believe in Bitcoin and the broader ecosystem of what it can be. This is kind of what I wanted to showcase, right? Like Bitcoin adoption versus the internet. So we're still in like 19, let's say we're in 2000 or something, because this is 2023, right? But the number of people who own Bitcoin is still much less than have access to the internet. So we're still in the early days of adoption of Bitcoin. And from what I can see from all the major financial institutions, we've cleared all the hurdles to making this a mainstream asset. I mean, you have Larry Fink talking about it being a store of value. You have ETFs now. You have the ability for pension funds and endowment funds to own Bitcoin. So I think there's still a lot of room for this to run. But what I think is really exciting about DeFi and crypto as a whole is the ability to really own your own money and not have governments or bad actors be able to just seize it from you, freeze your bank accounts, etc. So you can do really cool things with Bitcoin, like cold storage wallets, where you can literally download your Bitcoin onto a USB drive and take it wherever you want, and it's your money. And there's no way to follow you and try to collect that money, right? So it really gives you that like libertarian power over your money that I think, especially like me being from the US, there's a lot of roots of those types of values in the US, to where you don't want the government telling you what to do with your cash or your gold. So it's the same for Bitcoin. And I think that's why you see countries like India, Nigeria, anywhere where there's not like stable government. Latin America has huge adoption of crypto. Obviously, I believe it's Ecuador who literally runs their country on Bitcoin, right? So it'll be really interesting to see. But cool to pass the 100K milestone. I'm sure we'll have lots of booms and busts from here, and excited to see where this goes.